Hello, BookTube. I wanted to do my very first author's answers today. For those of you who don't know, that's a series of great discussion prompts by the blogger and booktuber J.D. Archer. And the reason that I haven't done any until now is because it feels like a bit of a cheat. Because right now, and for the last few months, agonizingly, I have no work in progress. I have plenty of work in progress. I shouldn't put it that way. I write all the time. I write for hours every day, but it's nonfiction. It's stuff for deadline. It's reviews. Uh, I don't have a fiction work in progress right now, and that's been eating me up. I cannot, for some reason, I am in a very strange position for me of not being able to decide on a project, which is crazy. That is not me at all. I want to write some work of fiction between now and NaNoWriMo. I want always to be writing a work of fiction. And yet I've been absolutely paralyzed as to how to choose what to do. Some of you have been emailing me. One of you has been FaceTiming me, and it doesn't seem to have any effect whatsoever. So I've been looking at authors' answers and all of Ben Sanders' AuthorTube videos, and I've been yearning to participate, but haven't been able to. But this one I just couldn't let go. JT's latest video, authors' answers video, was on movie novelizations, and that strikes near and dear to my heart. So I think it's a fascinating uh, phenomenon, the movie novelization, which is in the movie industry, it's sort of a long tail thing. It's a thing that studios came up with as a way to uh, add on profit to their movie product. In this case, by uh, giving moviegoers a bit of that experience that they can actually take with them, that they can have at home. That instead of the old, those of you, most of you demographically, I'm sure, won't have any idea what I'm talking about. But once upon a time, the only place you could see a movie was in the movie theater. You couldn't take that world home with you, or on TV. You could only see it when it showed. There was no way for you to record it and watch it at will. uh, and movie studios realized right away. They realized 100 years ago that this was another medium, but that it would work. That they were sisters, and that if you could make a book out of a movie, that book would enjoy sales that were sort of built in. But it really took off. I mean, novelizations of movies have existed for a long time, since the beginning of the 20th century. But it really took off not so much once Hollywood became corporate, but once the publishing industry became corporate, once the same corporation started to own both the movie and a publishing house, then movie novelizations took off like crazy, and now they're absolutely inevitable. You virtually cannot see a product in movie theaters without the movie corporation trying to make money off it in bookstores as well. And it doesn't always take the form that you would think. So you would think that, for instance, if a movie theater adapts a classic, they would put the movie cover, always legendarily bad, onto that public domain classic and simply put that in bookstores. And they do that. But they also do other things. Movies, there have been movies made from classic books that then have novelizations of their own. So you have like, for instance, well, I don't know that it's actually happened, but an example would be if somebody makes a big screen, huge, big deal Oscar bait movie about Oliver Twist, there might be not only a version of Oliver Twist with the movie cover, but also a novelization of the movie. With the original novel by Oliver Twist and the novelization by whoever. And it also takes the form of Sacrilege, as we saw, I think it was last year. A movie company made a remake of Lew Wallace's mega bestseller novel, Ben-Hur. And the Lew Wallace's novel is almost unendurable, and it was made into a great movie with Charlton Heston, and which was, I think, a remake itself. And then it was remade just recently with the CGI and the special effects that really enhance the set piece chariot scene. The chariot race scene in the new Ben-Hur movie is something you really have to see. You really don't have to watch the rest of it. But when that movie was coming out, I thought, oh my god, that means that bookstores are going to have a reprint of Lew Wallace's novel with instead of, the great movie poster for the Charlton Heston movie. When movie posters were art, when they weren't just a cascade of faces. But instead of that, I thought we'll have a still from the new movie. I forget the name of the six-pack a day tobacco addict who is the action star, who was did his shirtless action scenes and then was immediately hustled to his trailer in order to receive oxygen. I forget the name of that actor, but I assumed he would be shirtless on the cover. And then I went into a bookstore and saw a new paperback of Ben-Hur, sure enough, with a shirtless actor on the cover. And I thought, oh, wow, isn't that something? After all this time, more than a century, Lew Wallace has got his day in the sun again. But it turned out no. It turned out that what I was looking at was Sacrilege. His great-great-granddaughter took his novel and fixed it. In heavy air quotes. She removed a lot of the antique language. She played down a lot of the heavy-handed Christian proselytizing that was throughout the book, and made her own version of Ben-Hur. And I guess had the right to do this and without fear of lawsuits because she's, I guess, part of his literary estate. The Lew Wallace literary estate can't exactly sue his great granddaughter. I have no idea, but surely a fate worse than death. But when I was thinking about JD's subject about movie adaptations and TV adaptations just in general, I realized that the heyday for me, the time when I not only became aware of them as items, but when I think a lot of really good ones started to appear, was the late 70s. In the late 70s, you had not only the hack author James Blish doing Star Trek adaptations, and he did a series of books collecting his adaptations of Star Trek episodes that had aired on TV. He would be mailed working scripts, and he would write up each episode in 20 pages, 30 pages, something like that. And those books are a perfect example of what I'm talking about. They, for us Star Trek fans at the very beginning, when we had nothing, when we had a choice between waiting with rabbit ears on the black and white TV for a rerun of an episode and then watching it, we had a choice between that or writing our own stuff and making dot matrix fanzines, and we did both. But to have novels, to have books in bookstores that we could go and get, even if it was just reliving our old episodes, it was heaven. And that, I think, is the explanation for why those books sold like griddle cakes when they shouldn't have. No one had ever heard of such a thing before, and all of a sudden, drugstore owners with a little metal spinner rack of paperbacks were getting people coming in saying, "Could you order this?" No one had ever done that before, and they would get many requests. And bookstores, actual bookstores, Crocs and Brentano's all the way up Bookstore Row in New York, they got lots and lots of requests for these things, and I read them. Blish he's no pro stylist. Those of you who might be a fan of his book, A Case of Conscience, oh my, you need to up your game. And his Star Trek stories have recently been collected in a beautiful Barnes & Noble leatherbound edition, some of them, which I thought was just perfect. In a way, just perfect. And the late 70s also saw, it wasn't just TV, the late 70s also saw great adaptations of movies. Some that made sense and others that didn't. Like, for instance, there was the very first Star Wars book from the Journal of the Whills, which had George Lucas's name on it, but was written by Alan Dean Foster, who is a science fiction hack of a wonderful variety, absolutely readable in every way. His Flinks and Pip novels, there's a new one coming out. That series is wonderful, and he did a lot of other things too. His short story collections are worth finding, and he has gone on he has stayed in the game of movie adaptations. He's done Star Trek. He does. When you see a movie adaptation coming down the pike, of some gigantic mega blockbuster. It'll be Greg Cox, it'll be Alan Dean Foster, there's a short list of such people, and his Star Wars book, Journal of the Wills, and also the one that he did under his own name, A Splinter of the Mind's Eye, are actually worth reading. But in the Star Wars novel that he wrote, fans would come to that and it sold like crazy. It sold millions of copies, and it did so because fans had seen the movie and wanted something else. Same thing with the Howard Chaykin comics that Marvel Comics came out with for Star Wars. They sold like crazy because fans came out of the movie theater and had nowhere to go. They wanted to return to that world at their leisure, in the privacy of their own home, and the novel was the way to do it. And the same thing with it, to an even more. I mean, you got a lot more in the Alan Dean Foster, the George Lucas Star Wars novel than you got in the movie, and the same thing was true with Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek novel for Star Trek the movie. Gene Roddenberry, actually, I'm a little unclear on who did the ghostwriting for this book. I don't think it was Roddenberry who wrote it from beginning to end, but it was absolutely fascinating. It was a classic example of one way to do a movie adaptation, which is to add tons of stuff. Now, if you're Gene Roddenberry, you can bloody well do that without worrying that the studio is going to sue you. And as a result, his Star Wars novel, Star Trek novel, the only one he ever wrote, is full of footnotes at the beginning before he lost interest in the device, and it's full of background information stuff that you don't get in the movie, and that would frankly have improved the movie quite a bit. And then you get those where you get a movie that you saw and you want more of it, and then there were cases where the studio was maybe a little more inept, or the whole process was a little weirder, and one of those would be Superman. The Christopher Reeve Superman movie, which spawned a book, but you couldn't really call it a novelization. It was by Elliot Maggin, and it was called Superman: The Last Son of Krypton. And despite the fact that it had a movie still on the cover, I can't imagine how many fans of the Superman movie went to that book, read it, and were completely bewildered as to what was going on. It wasn't anything like the movie. It was just a Superman novel. That's all. Those wild and woolly days are largely over now, because corporations have just gotten finer and finer control over their long tail products. So the chances that you will buy a movie adaptation today and find substantially different stuff in it than you saw on the screen are less and less all the time. Once upon a time, like for instance Vonda McIntyre's great adaptations of Star Trek 2 and 3 are full of extra stuff, where she got the scripts and just decided, well, we need more here, there needs to be something else here, etc., etc. And she just adds those scenes, and a lot of them aren't in even the original filmings of the movies that you will see at conventions. A lot of them are just her own inventions, and they're wonderful. But nowadays you largely won't see that. I despite the fact that I love to keep up with the work of people like Alan Dean Foster or any of the other writers who are always tapped for these adaptations. I like to keep up with what they're doing. Despite that fact, there's very little incentive to buy a movie adaptation now, because you can take these things home now. You can buy them. You can show them on a screen in your living room that is plenty big enough to simulate the big screen in a movie theater, and actually in some cases has better quality, and that doesn't have idiots 2 rows from you answering a cell phone call and then maintaining a cell phone conversation while the movie is taking place. You don't have the audience with all of these little nuclear flashes of bright blue screens lighting up. You don't have people talking to each other, or sneezing, or coughing, or doing who knows what else. The movie-going experience in your home now easily beats the movie-going experience even at an IMAX theater. And the result is that movie adaptations have had to change. It used to be that the only way you could take that experience home with you was with a movie adaptation or a TV adaptation, whether it's a book or a comic book or something like that. Now, home is where most people experience these things. The movie industry where you go to the theater is dying. home is where people get these things. So there's less and less of a need for novelizations, which I think probably accounts for the huge boom in popularity of those bigger picture books, the art of such and such, the making of such and such, because that's all behind the scenes stuff. You can't bring that home with you. You can't have storyboards, on your plasma screen TV. It might be an extra on a DVD, but you'd have to call it up and find it and whatnot. You can't bring it to bed with you. Whereas with those books you can. And that, I think, is probably why movie adaptations are issued in lower numbers now, and there's very little creativity to them anymore. Every once in a while, an author like Alan Dean Foster, I mean, no one's going to tell him you can't do X, Y, or Z, especially if he's writing about Star Trek or Star Wars. So every once in a while, a writer like him will be able to throw in a detail to their novelization that's just done out of whim, and that's fun. And I like that, and I read them anyway. It's kind of a sense of solidarity. I have a friend who works in Hollywood, and she has been telling me for years that what you really need to do, what you really need to let me help you do, is get your name onto the list of those writers, because there are hardly any people who can turn in clean, readable prose in the huge amount of page counts required for these jobs in the tiny amount of time. 60,000 words in 2 weeks. I can do that, and the end product will be free of error and readable. There aren't a lot of people in the world who can do that, and I always respond to her. Well, the main selling point to get on that list is that you have a proven track record. No one's going to hire me to do a novelization of the Avengers: Infinity War when I have no novels to my credit. Well, you can look and see that I've done a vast amount of writing on deadline, but that writing at that length and at that speed is a horse of different color. Which brings me back around to my work in progress and how I don't have one. What I would like to do, I'll make another video about this because there's no sense in not repeating myself to you. But what I'd like to do for my next work in progress, whether it spill over into NaNoWriMo or not, is come up with a story and then follow it through on BookTube in every step of the way. So I involve you in the plotting, I involve you in the writing, I do the writing updates, I start doing all the AuthorTube stuff. Then I involve you in the process of shopping it around with the goal of actually getting it published. The whole process from start to finish. I would love to do that and make videos about it. But in order to do that, I need to come up with a subject. So I think what I want to do, I don't know how this is connected to movie novelizations, but I'm sure that JD will forgive me. What I think I'm going to do is make a list of my prospective projects and then just put it up to a vote and see what the rest of you think. But in the meantime, before I do any of that, I wanted to make this video as a hymn of praise to movie novelizations, especially to the grand old movie novelizations of decades past, and urge you, if you see such a thing, if you see a movie novelization of an older movie, you might not want to completely dismiss it. There might be work involved there that might interest you. Certainly I found that to be true. But anyway, I'll get back to book stuff in no time at all. Thank you, BookTube.